Serafina had stopped counting the rejections after the 12th one. It wasn't that she was ugly. She knew that, objectively. Her hair was a rich auburn, her eyes a striking green, her features pleasant enough. But pleasant wasn't beautiful, and in a kingdom where noble daughters were expected to be ornamental, pleasant simply wasn't enough. It wasn't that she was stupid either. She could read and write in 4 languages, debate philosophy with scholars, manage an estate's finances with ease. But intelligence in a woman was considered threatening, and the sons of noble houses didn't want a wife who could outsmart them. And it wasn't that she was cruel or cold or difficult. She was kind, her servants said, generous, quick to laugh and slow to anger. But none of that mattered. Not when her dowry was modest, her family's title minor, her prospects dim. Not when there were dozens of other noble daughters with prettier faces and larger fortunes, and the good sense to hide their intelligence behind simpering smiles. So the suitors came, and the suitors left, and Serafina learned to steel herself against the sting of rejection. Lord Aldrich had been the first. He'd taken one look at her hair. Too red, he'd said, like fire waiting to burn, and declined the match. Lord Brennan had been the second. He'd engaged her in conversation, seemed genuinely interested, then blanched when she'd corrected his misquotation of a famous philosopher. "I prefer a wife who knows her place," he'd said on his way out the door. And so it had gone. 13 suitors over 5 years, 13 rejections, each one delivered with varying degrees of diplomacy, but all carrying the same message. You are not enough. Her father had stopped arranging matches after the 13th. "Perhaps," he'd said gently, not meeting her eyes, "you're meant for a different path. The temple always needs—" No. Serafina had cut him off, her voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I won't hide myself away because men find me inconvenient." But as the months passed, and no new suitors came, she'd begun to wonder if hiding might be the kinder option after all. The invitation arrived on a grey autumn morning. Serafina stared at the heavy parchment, at the royal seal pressed into black wax, at the elegant script requesting her presence at the Lycan king's selection. "This must be a mistake," she said. Her father shook his head, looking as bewildered as she felt. "It's addressed to you specifically. Lady Serafina Ashford, of the House of Ashford, is hereby invited to present herself as a candidate for the position of Queen." "But I'm—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "I'm nobody. I'm the woman no one wants. I'm the 13th rejection walking." "It's not a mistake." Her mother's voice was careful, measured. "The king's advisers sent invitations to every eligible noble daughter in the realm. It's a formality, Serafina. You're not expected to be chosen." Of course not. She was never expected to be chosen. But she went anyway. The selection was held at Blackmoor Castle, a fortress of ancient stone that loomed against the mountains like a sleeping giant. Serafina arrived with 2 trunks, 1 maid, and the grim determination of a woman with nothing left to lose. The other candidates arrived with entourages. There were 47 of them in total, the most beautiful, accomplished, wealthy daughters of every noble house in the kingdom. They swept through the castle in clouds of silk and perfume, their laughter like bells, their smiles like weapons. Serafina watched them from the edges of rooms, from the corners of hallways, from the shadows where plain women with modest dowries naturally gravitated. She watched them compete for attention, for favour, for the chance to catch the king's eye. She did not compete. What would be the point? The selection process took 3 days. On the first day, the candidates were presented at a grand feast. On the second, They were tested on various skills: dancing, conversation, etiquette, the subtle arts of court politics. On the third, the king would make his choice. Serafina survived the first 2 days by being invisible. She sat at the far end of the feast table, spoke only when spoken to, danced only when absolutely required. The other candidates barely noticed her existence. Neither, she assumed, did the king. She was wrong. On the morning of the third day, Serafina was summoned to the throne room. She went, expecting to be dismissed. Perhaps her invitation truly had been an error, and someone had finally noticed. Perhaps she'd committed some unknown breach of etiquette and was being sent home in disgrace. Either way, she dressed in her plainest gown and walked to her fate with her head held high. The throne room was empty except for the king. Caden Valerius, king of the Lycans, sat on his throne like a shadow given form. He was everything the stories said: massive, dark-haired, with a face that could have been carved from the mountains themselves. His eyes were the gold of ancient coins, burning with an intensity that made Serafina's breath catch in her throat. He watched her approach in silence. She stopped at the required distance, curtsied as protocol demanded, and waited for the dismissal that was surely coming. It didn't come. Instead, the king rose from his throne. He descended the steps slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. And then, impossibly, inexplicably, he dropped to one knee before her. Serafina forgot how to breathe. "I have watched you," Caden said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her bones. "For 3 days, I have watched you. While the others preened and performed, you observed. While they competed for attention, you gave it. While they showed me what they thought I wanted to see, you showed me who you actually are. Your Majesty, You corrected Lord Brennan's philosophy quotation at the feast," he continued. "You solved the trade dispute puzzle faster than any of my advisors. You gave your dessert to a serving girl who looked hungry when you thought no one was watching." His golden eyes blazed. "I was watching. I saw everything." Serafina's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't understand." "I know you've been rejected." His voice softened. "I know you've been told you're not enough. Not beautiful enough. Not wealthy enough. Not demure enough. I know you've been made to feel like a consolation prize at best. An inconvenience at worst." The words struck deep, finding every wound she'd tried to hide. Those men were fools. Caden reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not touching. "They looked at you and saw everything you weren't. I look at you and see everything you are. Brilliant, kind, observant, strong." His jaw tightened with barely contained emotion. "You are not a consolation prize, Serafina. You are the first choice. The only choice." She was trembling now. Tears burned in her eyes. "The mate bond recognized you the moment you entered this castle," he said quietly. "My soul has been reaching for yours since the feast. I've spent 3 days fighting the urge to claim you in front of everyone, to announce to the world that the search was over the instant you walked through my doors." "Why didn't you?" "Because you deserved better than that." He rose to his full height, but stayed close, towering over her, but somehow not intimidating. "You deserved to be chosen, not claimed. To be asked, not told. To know that my decision was made with clear eyes and a full heart." He took her hand, gently, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't pull away. "Lady Serafina Ashford," Caden said, "I choose you. First, last, and always. Will you be my queen?" Every rejection, every pitying look, every whispered comment about the Ashford girl who couldn't find a husband. All of it crumbled to dust in the face of this man, this king, kneeling before her and offering her everything. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes." Caden's smile transformed his severe features into something radiant. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a reverent kiss to her knuckles. "Then let's show them all," he said, "exactly how wrong they were about you." The announcement sent shockwaves through the castle. Caden made it himself, in front of all 47 candidates and their assembled entourages. He stood on the dais of the great hall, with Seraphina at his side, their hands intertwined, and declared that the selection was over. "Lady Seraphina Ashford has accepted my proposal," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "She will be my queen, my mate, my partner in all things. The rest of you are thanked for your participation and may return to your families." The silence lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then the whispers began. "The Ashford girl, the one with the red hair. She wasn't even competing. She barely spoke to anyone. Her dowry is practically nothing. Her family's title is minor at best. There must be some mistake, some trick. Perhaps she's enchanted him." Seraphina kept her expression calm, her spine straight, her chin lifted. She'd spent years learning to absorb this kind of commentary without flinching. But Caden's expression had gone cold as winter stone. "I will say this once," he announced, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. "Lady Seraphina is my chosen mate. Any disrespect shown to her will be treated as disrespect shown to me, and I do not tolerate disrespect." The whispers died instantly. One by one, the rejected candidates curtsied or bowed and filed out of the hall. Some looked shell-shocked, others looked furious. A few, those who had barely noticed Seraphina's existence during the selection, looked simply confused. Only one candidate approached before leaving. Lady Alara Blackwood was everything Seraphina was not. Golden-haired, blue-eyed, with a figure that curved in all the right places, and a dowry rumoured to be the largest in the realm. She had been the favourite to win the selection. Everyone had said so. She stopped in front of Seraphina, her expression unreadable. "Congratulations," she said. Her voice was cool, but not hostile. "I admit, I didn't see this coming." "Neither did I," Seraphina replied honestly. Something flickered in Ilara's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. "Most women in your position would gloat," Ilara observed, "would rub their victory in my face." "It's not a competition," Seraphina said. "Not anymore. And victory at someone else's expense has never been my style." Ilara studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "Perhaps the king chose better than I thought," she said. "I wish you well, Lady Seraphina. Truly." She curtsied and swept from the hall, leaving Seraphina staring after her in surprise. "That was well done," Caden murmured. "Ilara Blackwood is a powerful ally to have, and a dangerous enemy." "She didn't seem like an enemy. Because you treated her with dignity." His hand tightened around hers. "That's exactly the kind of queen this kingdom needs. Someone who builds bridges instead of burning them." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. There were fittings for her new wardrobe, gowns in every colour, made from fabrics she'd never been able to afford. There were lessons in court protocol, in Lycan customs, in the dozen different ways to address various ranks of nobility. There were meetings with advisors, tours of the castle, introductions to the endless parade of people who would now be part of her daily life. It was overwhelming. It was exhausting. It was wonderful. But through it all, what struck Serafina most was Caden himself. He made time for her every day, despite the crushing weight of his responsibilities. He took breakfast with her each morning, asking about her studies, her impressions, her concerns. He walked with her through the gardens each evening, telling her stories about the castle's history, about his centuries of rule, about the hopes he had for their shared future. He listened to her, really listened, in a way no one ever had before. "You solved the border taxation problem," he said one evening, stopping in the middle of the garden path to stare at her. Serafina blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "The proposal you made to my chief advisor this morning, the one about restructuring the merchant tariffs to incentivize local trade." He shook his head slowly. "My advisors have been arguing about that problem for 6 months. You solved it in an afternoon." Heat crept up her cheeks. "I just applied the same principles my father uses for our estate. It wasn't anything special." "It was brilliant." Caden stepped closer, his golden eyes intense. "You are brilliant, Serafina. Don't diminish that. Don't hide it. Not here. Not with me." "I'm not used to—" She stopped, her throat tight. "People don't usually want me to be brilliant. They want me to be quiet, agreeable, small. I want you to be exactly who you are." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite his size. "I want your opinions, your ideas, your challenges. I want you to argue with me when I'm wrong and push back when I'm being stubborn. I didn't choose a decoration, Serafina. I chose a partner." Tears burned in her eyes. "The men who rejected me were idiots who couldn't recognize a treasure when it stood right in front of them." His voice was fierce. "Their loss, my gain. And I will spend the rest of my existence making sure you never doubt your worth again." She kissed him. It surprised them both, Serafina most of all. She'd never initiated a kiss in her life, had never felt bold enough, wanted enough, brave enough. But here, in this garden, with this man who looked at her like she'd hung the stars, she felt all of those things. Caden responded instantly, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, grew heated, became something that made her toes curl and her heart race. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, his golden eyes were blazing. "I love you," he said. The words hit her like a wave, overwhelming and warm. "It's too soon," she whispered. "We've only known each other." "I have waited 300 years for you." His forehead pressed against hers. "I knew you were mine the moment you walked into my castle. The time since then has only confirmed what my soul already knew." His hands cradled her face. "I love you, Serafina. Not because you solved my trade problems or impressed my advisors. I love you because you gave your dessert to a hungry serving girl. Because you stand tall even when people whisper. Because you treat everyone, from queens to kitchen maids, with the same dignity and respect." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I love you because you are you," he finished. "And that is enough. It has always been enough. Anyone who made you feel otherwise was blind to the miracle standing in front of them." "I love you too," she breathed. "I didn't think I could. I'd given up on—" She laughed through her tears. "I love you, Caden. I don't know when it happened, but I do. I love you." He kissed her again, soft and reverent and full of promise. And for the first time in her life, Serafina didn't feel like a consolation prize. She felt chosen. She felt first. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Serafina's life. She threw herself into her new role with the same dedication she'd once applied to managing her family's modest estate. Except now, the stakes were infinitely higher and the resources infinitely greater. She sat in on council meetings, offering insights that made even the most seasoned advisors take notice. She toured the kingdom's orphanages and schools, making notes on improvements that could be made. She met with merchants and farmers and craftsmen, learning the needs of the people she would soon serve. And every night, she returned to Caden's side, sharing meals and conversations and the quiet intimacy of two people falling deeper in love. "You're remarkable, you know," he said one evening as they walked through the castle's ancient library. Serafina traced her fingers along the spine of a leather-bound tome, a smile playing at her lips. "You've mentioned that once or twice. I'll mention it every day for the rest of our lives." He caught her hand, pulling her close. "You've accomplished more in 6 weeks than most advisors manage in a year. The orphanage reforms alone will change thousands of lives. I just listened to what they needed." She shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise despite his constant efforts. "It wasn't complicated. It was to everyone else." His golden eyes were warm. "That's your gift, Serafina. You see solutions where others see only problems. You see people where others see only positions." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You see clearly. It's one of the things I love most about you." She rose on her toes to kiss him properly, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. 2 months ago, she'd never kissed anyone. Now she couldn't imagine a day without the taste of him on her lips. "The bonding ceremony is in 2 weeks," Caden murmured against her mouth. "Are you ready?" "I think so." She pulled back to look at him. "Are you?" "I've been ready for 300 years." His smile was radiant. "I was just waiting for you." The invitation list for the bonding ceremony included every noble house in the kingdom, which meant, Serafina realized with a sinking feeling, that her former suitors would be invited. "You don't have to face them," Caden said when he saw her studying the list. "I can have their invitations rescinded. No one would question." "No." Serafina set down the parchment, her jaw firm. "I want them there." Caden raised an eyebrow. "You do?" "I spent 5 years being rejected by these men. 5 years being told I wasn't enough. 5 years feeling like a failure because I couldn't make myself into what they wanted." She met his gaze. "I want them to see me now. I want them to see what I've become. I want them to know that the woman they dismissed is about to become queen." Pride blazed in his expression. "That's my mate." "Besides," she added, a hint of a smile crossing her face, "I want to see the looks on their faces when you kneel before me again." Caden laughed, a full, rich sound that echoed through the library. "For you, my love, I'll kneel as many times as you like." The invitations went out, the acceptances came back, and 3 days before the ceremony, Lord Brennan arrived at Blackmore Castle. Serafina was in the council chamber when he was announced, reviewing the final details of a trade agreement with the Eastern Territories. She looked up at the sound of his name and felt her heart stutter. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, handsome, impeccably dressed in the colours of his family's house. He'd rejected her 7 years ago, when she was 20, and still naive enough to hope that intelligence might be valued in a wife, he had taught her otherwise. "Lady Serafina." He bowed, his expression carefully neutral. Or should I say, Soon to be your majesty. Lady Seraphina will do for now. She set down her quill, folding her hands on the table. Lord Brennan, I wasn't expecting you until the ceremony. I came early to offer my congratulations in person. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. And to apologize. Seraphina went very still. Apologize? For my behavior when we last met. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was young, foolish. I valued the wrong things in a potential wife. You mean you valued a wife who wouldn't correct your mistakes? He flinched. I deserved that. You did. Seraphina rose from her chair, circling the table to stand before him. She was shorter than him, slighter, less physically imposing in every way. But she had faced down trade disputes and budget crises and the crushing weight of running a kingdom. She was not the same girl he had dismissed 7 years ago. I spent years believing there was something wrong with me, she said quietly. Years trying to figure out how to be less intelligent, less opinionated, less myself. Years wondering if I would ever be enough for anyone. Lord Brennan said nothing. Couldn't meet her eyes. You and the 12 others who rejected me taught me that I was worthless, that my mind was a liability, that I should hide the very things that made me who I am. Her voice hardened. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? I'm sorry, he whispered. Are you? She tilted her head. Or are you sorry that the woman you dismissed is about to become the most powerful person in the kingdom? Are you sorry for how you treated me? Or sorry that it didn't work out better for you? Silence stretched between them, heavy and damning. I don't know, Lord Brennan finally admitted. Both, perhaps. I'm not sure I can untangle them. It was, at least, honest. Then let me make something clear. Seraphina stepped closer, holding his gaze. I don't need your apology. I don't need your validation. I spent too many years seeking approval from people who would never give it. I'm done with that now. She smiled. Not cruel, but not warm either. I have a king who kneels before me, who values my mind instead of fearing it, who chose me first when everyone else passed me by. Your apology means nothing compared to that. Lord Brennan swallowed hard. I understand. Good. She stepped back, returning to her seat at the table. You're welcome at the ceremony, Lord Brennan. But if you ever suggest to anyone that you had anything to do with who I've become, I will personally ensure that every trade agreement your family depends on becomes significantly less favorable. His face went pale. I wouldn't dream of it. Excellent. She picked up her quill, returning her attention to the documents before her. You're dismissed. He fled. Seraphina waited until the door closed behind him before letting out a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling. Her heart was racing. But beneath the nerves, beneath the old hurts that still echoed in her chest, she felt something else. Power. The kind that came not from position or wealth, but from finally knowing her own worth. That was impressive. She looked up to find Caden leaning in the doorway, his golden eyes gleaming with pride. You heard? Every word. He crossed to her, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. You were magnificent, fierce, unstoppable. I was terrified, she admitted. Courage isn't the absence of fear. He pressed a kiss to her hair. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. And you, my love, are the bravest person I know. She melted into his embrace, letting his warmth steady her. Thank you, she whispered. for giving me the chance to become this. I didn't give you anything." His arms tightened around her. "You were always this person, Serafina. You just needed someone who could see it." She looked up at him, this king who had knelt before her, who had chosen her first, who had loved her exactly as she was. "I see you too," she said. "Every part of you." His smile was radiant. "I know. That's why I love you." The morning of the bonding ceremony dawned clear and golden. Serafina stood before the mirror in the Queen's chambers, studying the woman who looked back at her. Her gown was the deep green of forest shadows, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like starlight. Her auburn hair, too red, Lord Aldrich had said, like fire waiting to burn, was swept up and woven with tiny emeralds that matched her eyes. The mate mark on her neck, which had appeared the night Caden first kissed her, gleamed softly against her pale skin. She looked like a queen. More importantly, she felt like one. "You're beautiful," her mother said, adjusting the fall of her train. Her parents had arrived 3 days ago, still dazed by their daughter's transformation from rejected spinster to future queen. "I always knew you were special, Serafina. I just never imagined." "Neither did I." Serafina caught her mother's hand. "Thank you. For never making me feel like a burden. For never suggesting I change who I was." Her mother's eyes glistened. "You were never a burden. Never. The men who couldn't see your value were fools, every one of them." "The king said the same thing. Then he's wiser than all of them combined." Her mother kissed her cheek. "Be happy, my darling. You deserve it." The great hall was filled to bursting when Serafina entered. Every noble house in the kingdom had sent representatives. Lords and ladies in their finest clothes lined the walls, their jewels glittering in the candlelight. Foreign dignitaries occupied places of honor near the front. And scattered throughout the crowd, impossible to miss even if she'd tried, were the 13 men who had rejected her. Lord Aldrich, who had dismissed her for her hair. Lord Brennan, who had fled from her intelligence. Lord Castor, who had called her dowry inadequate. Lord Demetrius, who had said her hips were too narrow for childbearing. All of them, every single one of them, standing in this hall, about to watch her become queen. Serafina walked down the aisle with her head held high. She felt their eyes on her, felt their shock, their disbelief, their barely concealed envy. Some of them had married since rejecting her, women who were prettier, wealthier, more compliant. Women who would never challenge them or correct their philosophy quotations or solve trade disputes in an afternoon. Women who were not about to be crowned queen. At the altar, Caden waited. He was resplendent in his formal blacks, his dark hair swept back, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. The high priestess stood behind him, ready to perform the ceremony. But Serafina barely noticed anyone else. There was only him, only this man who had seen her when no one else had, who had knelt before her and offered her everything. She reached the altar, and Caden took her hands in his. "You're breathtaking," he murmured, for her ears alone. "You're not so bad yourself." He laughed, low and warm, and the sound settled something in her chest. The ceremony began. The high priestess spoke the ancient words, her voice echoing through the silent hall. She spoke of bonds that transcended time, of souls that recognized each other across centuries, of love that was both choice and destiny. And then she asked the question that would change everything. "Is there anyone present who objects to this union?" The hall went utterly silent. Serafina felt the weight of 100 eyes, felt the tension crackling in the air. She waited for someone to speak, for one of her former suitors to stand up, to claim some prior attachment, to try one last time to take this happiness from her. No one moved. No one dared. "Then we shall proceed." The priestess turned to Caden. "Your Majesty, do you choose this woman as your bonded mate, your queen, your partner in all things?" "I do." Caden's voice rang clear through the hall. "I choose her first. I choose her last. I choose her always." The priestess turned to Serafina. "And do you, Lady Serafina, choose this man as your bonded mate, your king, your partner in all things?" Serafina looked at Caden, at his golden eyes burning with love, at his hands steady around hers, at the future stretching out before them like an endless possibility. "I do," she said. "I choose the man who chose me when no one else would, who saw my worth when I had forgotten it myself, who knelt before me and made me believe I was worthy of being first." Caden's eyes glistened. "Then let the bond be sealed," the priestess declared. Caden cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. The bond ignited like fire in her veins, warm and bright and overwhelming. She felt him flooding through her, his love and his pride, and his fierce devotion becoming part of her very soul. She felt herself pouring into him, all her fears and her hopes and her trembling, fragile heart. They were one. They had always been one. They were just finally admitting it. When they parted, tears were streaming down both their faces. "I love you," he breathed. "I love you too." She laughed through her tears. "My king. My queen." The hall erupted in cheers, but Serafina barely heard them. She was too busy watching Caden kneel before her, again, just as he had promised, as the priestess placed the crown upon her head. "I present to you," the priestess announced, "Queen Serafina of Blackmoor." The cheering intensified. Howls of celebration echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Music started up from the gallery above, joyful and triumphant. And through it all, Serafina stood tall, crowned and claimed and chosen. She let her gaze sweep across the hall, finding each of her former suitors in turn. Lord Aldrich, pale and tight-lipped. Lord Brennan, unable to meet her eyes. Lord Castor, Lord Demetrius, all the others, every man who had rejected her, now bowing before her. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't rub their faces in her victory. She simply met each of their gazes, calm and steady, and let them see exactly what they had thrown away. Then she turned back to Caden, took his hand, and walked with him into their future. The feast lasted until dawn. There was dancing and feasting and more congratulations than Serafina could count. She met nobles who swore eternal loyalty. She accepted gifts from foreign dignitaries. She danced until her feet ached and laughed until her cheeks hurt. But the moment she treasured most came late in the evening, when Lady Alara Blackwood approached her with a glass of wine and a genuine smile. "You were right," Alara said. "When you said it wasn't a competition, I didn't understand then, but I do now." "What do you mean?" "I spent my whole life being told I was the best, the most beautiful, the most accomplished, the obvious choice." Ilara shook her head. "But you were told you weren't enough, and you became queen anyway. Not because you were the obvious choice, but because you were the right one." Serafina didn't know what to say. "I think I was jealous at first," Ilara admitted. "But now I'm just impressed. You've accomplished more in 2 months than I would have managed in a year. The orphanage reforms, the trade agreements, the way you've earned the respect of even the most stubborn advisors. She raised her glass. To the Queen, who was never supposed to be chosen. May she reign for centuries. Serafina raised her own glass, her eyes stinging. Thank you, Ilara. That means more than you know. They drank together, two women who might have been rivals, choosing instead to be allies. And Serafina thought, this is what it means to be queen. Not the crown, not the power, but this. Building connections, earning respect, proving every day that you belong. She belonged. After 13 rejections and 5 years of doubt, she finally, truly belonged. 1 year later, Serafina stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun rise over Blackmoor. The kingdom spread out before her like a tapestry, rolling hills and ancient forests, villages and cities, farmland and mountains stretching to the horizon. Her kingdom now, her responsibility, her home. So much had changed in a year. The orphanage reforms she'd championed had transformed hundreds of lives. Children who had once been forgotten were now educated, cared for, given futures they never could have imagined. The trade agreements she'd negotiated had brought prosperity to regions that had struggled for decades. The bridges she'd built with former rivals had created alliances that strengthened the entire realm. She had done that. The woman no one wanted. The consolation prize. The 13th rejection. She had changed the world. You're thinking again? Caden's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her against his warmth. She leaned into him instinctively, the way she'd learned to do over countless mornings just like this one. Just reflecting, she said, on everything that's happened, on who I was a year ago versus who I am now. And what do you see? She turned in his arms to face him. The morning light caught the gold in his eyes, making them glow like embers. I see someone who finally stopped apologizing for existing, she said. Someone who learned that being different isn't the same as being less. Someone who found a partner who chose her first instead of last. Caden's expression softened. You were always that person, Serafina. The world just refused to see it. You saw it. I was the lucky one. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. I got to discover you before anyone else realized what they were missing. She laughed, rising on her toes to kiss him properly. Their loss. My gain. They stayed wrapped in each other's arms as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Through the bond, Serafina felt Caden's love, steady and warm and absolute. She felt his pride in everything she'd accomplished. She felt his wonder at the life they'd built together. And she felt something else, something new, a flicker of presence at the edge of her consciousness, tiny and bright and utterly miraculous. She went very still. Serafina? Caden pulled back, concern flickering in his eyes. What is it? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Her hand drifted to her stomach, her heart racing. Nothing's wrong at all. I think... Understanding dawned in his expression. His golden eyes went wide, then bright with tears. Are you... I think so. She laughed, the sound watery and joyful. I wasn't sure. I wanted to wait until I knew for certain. But I can feel it, Caden. Through the bond. I can feel... He kissed her before she could finish, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, he was laughing and crying at the same time, his hands cradling her face like she was the most precious thing in existence. A child, he breathed. Our child, after 300 years, after 13 rejections, she added softly, after everything. He dropped to his knees before her, pressing his forehead to her stomach. I love you, he murmured against the fabric of her gown. Both of you. I have loved you since before I knew your name, and I will love you until the stars burn out and the world turns to dust. Serafina ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. I love you too, she whispered. Thank you. For seeing me. For choosing me. For giving me everything I never dared to dream of. He looked up at her, his golden eyes blazing with devotion. You gave it to yourself. I just had the privilege of watching you become who you were always meant to be. The announcement of the heir's impending arrival sent the kingdom into celebration. But for Serafina, the most meaningful moment came in a quiet chamber, far from the feasts and fanfare. She had summoned her parents to the palace, and now they sat together in her private study, processing the news. Her mother wept, her father struggled to speak. I thought... He stopped, his voice thick. After everything, after all those men who couldn't see your worth, I thought you might never have this. A family, a future. I have more than I ever imagined, Serafina said. A husband who loves me, a kingdom that needs me, and now a child who will never doubt their worth, because I will spend every day of my life making sure they know they are enough. You're going to be a wonderful mother, her mother said. I had a good example. They embraced, three people who had weathered years of rejection and doubt, finally seeing the other side. Months later, when her daughter was born, Serafina held the tiny bundle in her arms and felt her heart expand to contain a love she hadn't known was possible. She's perfect, Caden breathed, perched on the edge of the bed, his finger captured in their daughter's tiny fist. Absolutely perfect. She is. Serafina studied the baby's face, auburn hair, golden eyes, features that were somehow both of theirs and entirely her own. What should we call her? Caden was quiet for a moment, his gaze soft on their daughter's sleeping face. Hope, he said finally, because that's what you gave me. That's what you give everyone you meet. The hope that things can be better, that people can be better, that the rejected and the overlooked and the underestimated can rise to become everything they were meant to be. Tears slipped down Serafina's cheeks. Hope. It's perfect. She looked down at the child in her arms, this tiny miracle who would never have existed if 13 men hadn't been too blind to see her mother's worth. Who would grow up in a castle surrounded by love, raised by parents who would never let her doubt herself? You will always be chosen first, Serafina whispered to her daughter. You will always be enough. And if anyone ever tells you otherwise, remember, your mother was rejected 13 times, and she became a queen. Caden pressed a kiss to her temple, his arm around them both. The greatest queen this kingdom has ever known, he added. Serafina leaned into his embrace, their daughter cradled between them. Once, she had been the woman no one wanted, the consolation prize, the 13th rejection. Now, she was a queen, a wife, a mother. A woman who had finally learned that being different wasn't being less. It was being irreplaceable. And she would never settle for anything less than first choice again. If you enjoyed Serafina and Caden's story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Leave a comment below telling me your favorite part, and I'll see you in the next one.